if they're connected. Gut feelings are what all animals possess. It warns them of danger or when it's safe. And the gut is connected to the brain.
Right.
The gut sends more connections to the brain than the brain sends to the gut. And the gut has more of the neurotransmitter serotonin in it than the brain does. So that the gut feelings are here to tell us about what is safe and what isn't. And when the brain in the gut and the brain in the heart and the brain up here in the head are connected, then we're grounded and present and very alert and very aware of what's going on. But when childhood trauma interferes with those connections, which it does, then we start to just work from up here, and we can think we can figure things just from up here. But actually, when you think about human beings, where did we evolve? We evolved for millions of years out in nature. How long does any creature in nature survive if they don't pay attention to their gut feelings? There's two places to be very nice from. One is just genuine human compassion and concern for others, but you're still grounded in yourself. That's great. But a lot of people are very nice because they are afraid not to be. Because they weren't liked who they were, they weren't loved for who they were. Being nice was their way of getting the love and the attention they needed. Let me tell you a story. In 1870, there was a French neurologist called Jean-Martin Charcot, who was the first one to describe multiple sclerosis, which is an inflammation of the nervous system, very debilitating. And Charcot said, in 1870, without any scientific research, but just from his own observation, that this was a stress-driven disease. Okay? Now, since then, there's been a lot of research to show how stress and trauma potentiate multiple sclerosis. It's not even controversial. Not that any neurologist knows that. They don't get taught this stuff in medical school. But the research is there. Niceness, ALS, amyotrophic lateral sclerosis, or known in Britain as motor neuron disease. There's been studies on ALS patients. They're extraordinarily nice. So there was from the Cleveland Clinic in Ohio, a major referral clinic, two neurologists published a paper at an international ALS or motor neuron congress. Why are ALS patients so nice? And what they described was that when people came to their office for diagnosis, before they met the physician, they had underwent EDX, electrodiagnostic testing of their nerves. And the technicians who'd perform the test would write on the side of the test, this person can't have ALS, she's not nice enough. Or I'm afraid this person has ALS, they're too nice. And the physicians, the neurologist specialists said, despite the shortness of their contact with their patients and the obviously unscientific nature of their observations, invariably they turned out to be right. And then I called Dr. Wilburn, who did this study, and I said, what did the other neurologists say? When you presented this, they said, yeah, we all noticed this. We just can't explain it. Since then, there's been a study where they've asked neurologists about their patients, and the answer is, all our ALS patients are extraordinarily nice. Now, what the neurologists don't do is they don't make the connection that niceness is a repression of healthy anger, and that repression of healthy anger plays a role in the onset of that disease. So it's not an accidental connection. Again, niceness can come from genuine concern for others, but that's not accompanied by an ignoring of yourself. You also care for yourself. Then you can be as nice as you want. But you also know how to say no. And you also know how to set boundaries. You know how to be angry if you need to be. But the niceness that comes from self-repression, that's the one that hurts. So my contention is, as I said earlier, when people don't know how to say no, the body will say no for them in the form of illness. And for a lot of people with serious illness, the illness is the wake-up call.
Yeah.
And they actually learn. And when they do, that can make a difference to the course of their illness. Sometimes, not always, but I've seen examples of remarkable healing when people learn to say no and stop being people pleasers. It's very stressful to take on everybody else's issues and ignoring your own. It's very stressful. That stress has a physiological impact on the body.
And you also suggest removing the things from your life that will stop you from seeing yourself, like social media.
Well,
because that can be a lot of
I can't remove social media from my life, but what I can remove is my attachment to it. For example, I don't have to look at the comments on all my talks on YouTube. Who says what? Who likes it? Who doesn't like it? You know, I'm not on Facebook. I don't have I have a professional Facebook page, but I don't administer it. But people go on Facebook, and who says what? Who likes me? Who doesn't like me? You know, they can wean themselves off that. So we may not be able to stay off social media to write my books. Thank God for the internet, but I don't have to be attached to it. So it's using it, but not letting it use you, which is very hard. If I don't pay attention, rigorous attention to what's going on inside, and if I keep looking to the outside to give me meaning and give me validation, then I can lose myself. Without inner peace, you're not going to be able to serve any of those goals properly. Or if you were, you do it at some risk to yourself. And so running around serving others in the name of this so-called higher goal undermines your inner peace. Then you're not on the right track. Inner peace is not a selfish goal. It's from a position of inner peace that we can speak compassionately and truthfully to others, that we can serve our other goals. But, you know, Eckhart Tolle talks about our inner purpose and our external purpose. And you stated a bunch of external purposes. And that's why there's this, I believe, if I may pardon the diagnosis, or the analysis, but that's why that disconnect that you mentioned. Because the goals that you stated were largely external. And what are the internal goals?
Inner peace.
Very good.
Yeah.
Now you have to put that into the mix. Because temporarily, when your book shows up as number one on the bestsellers list, or shows up at all, you feel some inner peace. But it's addictive. And there's a wonderful physician and researcher, Vince Felitti, and he said, it's hard to get enough of something that almost works. And so, yeah, you can get that temporary inner peace, but look at the long-term consequences of the workaholism. It's not inner peace. I can tell you that. You know, I can tell you after long experience, doesn't matter even how successful you are out there. We started the conversation with this. It's never going to give you inner peace. Inner peace doesn't come from the outside. That's not a goal anybody ever handed to you. That's something that you have to come to yourself. To go back to the question of what people can do for themselves, they can learn to breathe. And Eckhart Tolle, who's a spiritual teacher, he says that rather than go to retreats and therapists, just take a few conscious breaths several times a day. I mean, not to dismiss the other, but that's more important than anything else. And interestingly enough, the Buddha, when he was teaching his monks, in fact, one of the Buddha's assistants, Ananda, asked him, "Oh, Holy One, do you still meditate?" And he said, "Yes." "And what kind of meditation do you practice?" says Ananda. And Buddha says, "Observing the breath." So in Buddhist meditation, I'm not here to advocate for any particular pathway, and I'm not the practitioner of any religion, but hey, this is a very wise man. He thought awareness of breath as the most important portal into reality.
Let's pause here, because what Dr. Maté is saying is life-changing if you really let it land. If you've ever felt like you can't say no, like your worth depends on being liked, this isn't just a personality trait. It's a response to survival. Science shows the gut, the heart, and the brain are all deeply connected. When trauma disrupts that connection, we don't just lose our intuition, we lose our inner compass. And here's the truth. Constantly overriding your boundaries can silently stress your nervous system. Over time, that stress shows up emotionally, mentally, and yes, physically. So if you're always the nice one, ask yourself this: is my kindness coming from love or fear? Real healing begins the moment you give yourself permission to feel and to say no.
Okay, well, that takes me now to trauma.
Yeah.
Strangely enough, because I do have if there's such a thing as ADD, and there's no such thing as ADD as far as I'm concerned, it's a process, but without going into that, my mind just doesn't abide silence very well. And I related to the fact that when my brain and mind were being formed in my earliest moments, even before birth, but especially afterwards, there's a lot of terrible stuff happening around me.
Yeah.
And not to be present to it was a natural way of coping.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm talking about trauma here.
Yeah.
And in this workshop of 100 people that I'm facilitating, and not just in a workshop, but everywhere I go, doesn't matter what work I do. And as a physician, I just found that trauma, in the way I define it, was the underlying dynamic beneath every kind of illness, mental illness, physical illness. I'm not going to try and make that case for you right now, but that's what I found, and a lot of research tends in the same direction. And then you told me yourself, to my delight really, but to my surprise at the same time, that in your workshops, your retreats and so on, you find a lot of people have been, you said 80% or something? You use some, anyway, there are a lot of, you find trauma coming up all the time.
All the time.
Now, the interesting thing is, and that surprised me, and the reason it surprised me is because in none of the recordings of yours that I've heard, or the recordings of Eckhart Tolle, or recordings of H. Almaas, or any of the great spiritual teachers of our time, does the word trauma, as far as I can tell, ever mentioned as such.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So I'm curious, first of all, why not?
Well, all I can do is speak for myself.
Please.
So, like I think I shared with you, especially when I do retreats, when people are doing deeper, really deep spiritual work. Right. I mean, some sort of questions about trauma come up on a daily basis. It's rare to get through a day where someone isn't, and I don't mean trauma that's not directly addressed, but you think might be there, but I mean just overtly, talked about. Someone brings it up to me. So that's usually when it gets talked about, when I really address it, is usually when someone really brings it up. And there's a reason for that. And I'll say this to people when I talk to them. I've educated myself to some extent on trauma. There's probably, I don't know if any of us get through early childhood totally unscathed. I don't imagine I did either, but I haven't experienced myself certainly to have sort of the more heavy traumas that a lot of people come to me. So number one, from an experiential standpoint, I don't have that expertise. From an educational standpoint, I also know that that's not my area of expertise. I don't want to pretend like it is. I will often say when I'm, especially at retreats and when the subject comes up, that I'll talk to people about how they might be able to be with that while at a retreat, but I will often suggest that people reach out to get some really good, specialized help from people who are experts in this. Okay. To think that your spiritual teacher is going to be an expert in trauma is probably unrealistic. I think it's important for spiritual teachers to be open to addressing it and dealing with it when it comes up, and to probably at least educate themselves in some basic way. I've met lots of people who have come to me and they're talking about some inner experience, and it's just terrifying them. Yeah. And I've learned over time to distinguish between the kind of terror, which is this sort of like the ego meeting its existential limitation. That's a kind of terror. People can, when they're ready, they can let go into that. They can surrender into that. But if it's the terror, that's the terror of trauma coming back again. I've met so many people that a spiritual teacher says, just dive in. Yeah. And well, they tried to dive in and they ended up worse for doing it, right? Because that's not what you want to, as far as I know, that's not the right direction for that kind of fear. Mm-hmm. So, when someone is like, when I realize, okay, there's some trauma aspect here, I'll suggest that you got to slow the whole thing down, take it in little bites, I won't go into all the pointers, but try to stay really grounded, connected with your body. If you start to get, overwhelmed, don't think you have to just bull your way through it. That's counterproductive. That's what I mean. Like I have an elementary understanding of it enough to I think, to give some useful guidance in those situations, but I'm not an expert. And I don't want to pretend like I'm an expert.
No, that's fair
So I'm
enough.
not even sure what I would write in a book,
Yeah,
that I would feel comfortable with.
fair enough. But it's not an argument. They're just giving you information.
No, I'm not taking it that way.
Yeah,
I'm just
fair enough.
yeah.
From my point of view, it'd be so refreshing if somebody like you or any of these others I mentioned could actually just say the word.
Yeah.
And say, I may not be the one to deal with it. I may not, but I know it's here.
Yeah.
I know it's affecting many of you.
Yeah.
That would, to me, be really helpful.
Understood.
Yeah, okay.
Understood.
Thank you. Now,
if you listen to enough tapes, you're going to hear it.
okay.
Yeah, it's there. But
I got to listen to more tapes.
No, don't. No, you don't.
Okay. I was going to meditate, but now I'm going to listen to it.
No, but I understand what you're saying, and I think your point is well taken. It really is, because it's a bigger issue with more people than I would have ever dreamed with when I started out this stuff.
Or me as a physician.
I'm sure. Yeah. And it's an important thing to be able to identify, and for people to get some really good skilled help with that. Like, just those two things right there are just extremely important.
So that then brings me to spiritual bypass and a light to that trauma in the spiritual world. I once did an 8-day retreat with Sasaki Roshi, not Suzuki Roshi, but Sasaki Roshi, who I think was he was Leonard Cohen's guru. He worked at Mount Shasta, and he just died a few years ago, well over age of 100. But when he was in his 90s, there was a front page article in the New York Times that for decades he'd been groping women. Mm-hmm. This great Zen teacher. And I participated in a retreat, and he really was a wonderful teacher. Mm-hmm. And I'm not taking anything from their power to teach.
Understood.
And he would grope women, and then when the women would complain, some women would complain, his acolytes, his assistants would say to these women, Buddhism is all about non-attachment. Mm-hmm. Why are you so attached to your breasts? If he wants to touch your breast, let him touch your breasts. What's going on?
Well, first of all, there's a damn big problem in spirituality.
Yeah.
Right? There's a big, big problem. I think that's the first thing that needs to be acknowledged. There's a big, big problem. And there's lots of reasons for that. But I think one of them goes back to the phrase you used to open this last little bit up is spiritual bypassing. I remember reading myself in a book from a Zen teacher that the teachings were basically, I thought, quite sound and good. But when there was a Q&A in the book, and it was asked if Zen meditation is good enough to sort of cure someone of all their psychological, emotional ills. And he said yes. And when I read that, I was like, that's wrong. Like, the other stuff might have been good in this book, but he's just flat wrong about that one. And I think there's this pervasive, it's through lots of these kind of episodes like you've mentioned, it's slowly starting to change, but not fast enough. But there's this thing, and this goes for not only teachers, but anybody, is that, and we touched upon this earlier when we were talking about enlightenment experiences. There's a spiritual line of development, there's human line of development. They do interact with each other, but they are also simultaneously not the same line of development. And you can be very highly developed in spiritual insight and be an emotional child, right? Maybe you had your own trauma, maybe you just never grew up, maybe becoming a teacher where you were so, had so much adulation, was part of what kept you from really growing up, like, you know what I mean? That kept you in this sort of more infantile state. And I think what we need more, and I think everybody, teachers and students, need to understand this, that these experiences do not confer human perfection upon you. You can still not have your emotional human ego act together at all, even if you have really big, powerful spiritual transformation.